Good morning, team. So today we're going to learn about layers. We're going to convert this picture of this little squirrel in high definition, full color, to this little picture where we've got a color burst, and it is literally just the little squirrel that is in color now. Everything else is black and white. A lot of people wanted to know about this, so this is probably one of the easiest things that you can do in Photoshop, and it can look really good in certain situations. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start with our image. So what we've got to do when we're changing an image in any way, the first thing that we should get into, which is good practice, is to make a duplicate layer. So it's basically to copy your picture so that if you make any changes and it all goes a bit wrong, no problem, you've got your original to go back to. So how do we do that? Really simple in Photoshop. Go to your background layer in your layers panel and press Control and the letter J. There you go. Simple as that. So Control letter J. That gives us a copy of the layer. So what is a layer and how does it work? This is simple and it's really useful for everything we do in Photoshop. So a layer is basically a filter on top of your image. So if you imagine taking a picture and putting a piece of glass over it, and you can paint certain parts of it. So if you're looking at it from above, it looks like a color is a part of the image itself, but you can always remove it if you want and go back to the original. That's basically what a layer is. It's like filters, one on top of another. So you layer color, you layer contrast, you layer light, everything you do on top of the image. And you can put them in different orders if you want, but we won't go into too much details. So let's have a look and see how we change this image. It's really simple. So one of the things that we need to do, and we'll do this a lot in all of our tutorials, a lot of it, is to isolate parts of your image. So we need to pick certain bits of the image. So the way we do that is over on the left hand side of your screen, you will find a brush, and it's called a quick selection tool. Yeah, there are different ways of using this tool. I think I mentioned them in yesterday's lesson, but basically if you click it, you've got different options there. This is probably the most popular one, which is just the quick selection tool itself. It's the standard one, and you can use this by simply painting over the image you want to isolate. So you just run your cursor over the image. It's very good at picking up pixels, and just run it over. Pardon me. And at the top you've got a plus and a minus button, so if you add too much you can take it away simply by running your brush over it, or if you haven't done enough you go back and add to your selection. Okay, just by doing exactly the same thing, just run it over. Right, okay, so what that does is basically gives us an outline of the image we want. So I want to make sure there's whiskers in this image, so I'll go over them as well. Okay, so that gives us a rough outline of our subject, what we want to isolate. In this particular case, it's our little red squirrel. What I need to do now, though, is to refine it, because if I was to change things from there, it would look shocking. It would just look like there's bits of color here and there's like gaps, and it doesn't really work. So what I want to do is make this as realistic as possible. So what we use is a thing called a mask. So at the top of your screen you'll see two boxes. When you're in this mode, and it'll say select subject or select and mask. Let's go for select and mask. Oh, select and mask. Right, what select and mask does is, I'm going to put that on there, it puts it shows us our image, but it kind of blanks everything else out. That's all that does. It's just blanking everything out so we can concentrate on our image. And as I mentioned yesterday, there are different ways of doing this. You can do this by just clicking on this particular option. The idea is for your image to stand out so it looks different to the background. So it doesn't do anything other than that. So in this particular case, and most of the time, I use red because it makes everything else stand out. Yeah, I can see the edge of my subject in much more detail. So let's not get hung up about that one. Okay, so using our tools, which are located on the left hand side of the screen, we have different brushes, and we will use them all, but not use them all today. We're only going to talk about, we're going to make this very simple because that's what this tutorial is about. So again, we're going to go to our refine edge brush. So this is the one, the brush with the little hairs. It looks like a little hand with its little hairs on there. Okay, we're going to take a brush. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see to start with. I'll take my brush, and all I'm going to do, and if you look at the settings, by the way, over here, so if you need to copy them, make a note. Okay, so there's nothing really highlighted, nothing's changed. It's a default. Okay, so I've made my subject object aware. You could do color aware, but I just like object aware. It's a choice, whatever works for you. And what I'm going to do with my brush, half on my subject and half in the blanked out area, I'm going to run this around the edge of my subject, like so. When I take my brush away, that will redefine the edge. So rather than have bits of green like you see here, which I don't want in my final image, yeah, what this brush does, it defines that so you can have individual hairs. It does have a selection up here for refine hair, which kind of makes things a little bit easier, so you can try that. I don't often use it because it works, but it doesn't always work the way I want it to. So just by running the brush, you can see here that it's very clear in its way of selecting the hairs on our little squirrel. Again, you won't see it until you actually take your brush away. So press your brush, run it around your image, and then take your brush off. Then you'll see the difference. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, or a little bit smaller, sorry, because it takes a little bit of time. So it's easier to do it this way. And all I'm going to do is run it around my subject, make sure I get all those little hairs in. It's very clever, Photoshop, for working out what I need and what I don't need. Okay, because it works out what the subject is I want, I'm going to run all the way around. So take your time and do this properly, but it doesn't take long. It's really good. Okay, so I'll zoom in. You can see now it's picked up all the little hairs. Yeah, it's taken out all the things I don't want. Even if it doesn't, I can go back and change it later. But what all I've done in effect by doing this is isolate that squirrel. All I've done is made my selection so it fits around that squirrel. Cool. Okay, so we're there. That's what we want. Right, so what I'm going to do is make that fit screen. So everything I do from this point, while I've got my marching ants on the squirrel, will only affect everything inside those marching ants. So if I go to my adjustment layer and I go to colour, knowing where my ants are, if I change the hue and saturation, I can change the colour of my squirrel. It doesn't change the background at all. It literally just changes everything inside my marching ants. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to take this back to normal, which is 0, because it's beautiful enough. So what I want to do is not change the colour of the squirrel. I want to remove the colour from around the squirrel. Basically, I want that squirrel to be the only colour thing in this particular image. So what I need to do, because I've gone and done that hue and saturation, I'm going to go back up to select and go to reselect, because that's where we were. So back to where we were in effect. Going to make sure we're on level 1. Now, the way I can change everything other than the squirrel is to change my little selection. So my little marching ants. And the way to do that, if I go to select and then inverse, it basically turns my selection inside out. So now everything is selected except for the squirrel in the middle. So everything I do from now on will only affect the background. So I want to lose all the colour. I want to make it black and white, in fact. So I go back to my adjustment layer. I'll make sure I'm back in layer 1, which is my copy. And I'm going to go to adjustments. And I'm going to go down to this little square that's got half black and half white. Well, that's exactly what it is. It's black and white. And that's what we want. So I'm going to just click that button. And immediately everything outside of my selection has gone black and white, which is great, because that's exactly where we want to be. However, we need to tidy this up a little bit, because if I zoom in, you can see there's little bits of green just around the edge there, which is just a residue of, it's not all the way around, it's just on some part of it, which is great, because that means our selection was spot on. So how do we change that? Well, this is great, because with layers, we've got it automatically, when you create a new layer, what you do, in fact, is make a layer, what you call a layer mask. So next to your action, so in this case black and white, we have a square, a little white square. Yeah. So you don't create that, it creates it automatically. So when you add a new layer, it creates this layer panel, adjustment layer, which means that as long as I make sure that's selected, so I'll click on this little white square, as long as that's selected, that means I can now add or remove from this layer. And how do we do that? We do that by using our paintbrush, which is really good. So select your brush, yeah, change the size, and you can obviously you adjust this to your needs, and you can change the hardness. So just like a paintbrush, if you want it absolutely rigid straight lines, make it hard. If you want to gradually work your way in, like you were cutting in, if you like, on a paintbrush, you'd make it really soft, which is really great, because it works much better for this particular job. So I will make my hardness 0, make it really feathery, if you like. So what I've got to do, I'm going to show you just roughly. So if on my paintbrush, yeah, on the left on the left hand side you've got these two squares. These two squares basically is your color panel, let's put it that way. I can change different colors with this, but it's normally set, and if it's not reset to black and white, just double click this little icon underneath and it goes back to black and white. So while it's on white, it will remove, or it will convert everything to the same state as the background. So if it's on white, I can put my paintbrush on and I can paint anything I like black and white, so I can correct anything that's not right. If I just swap this over and just press this little button to convert it back to black, it does the complete opposite. It then puts the color back in. So that means I can adjust things a lot easier. So let's just zoom in. We'll zoom in a little bit and we'll go to these green bits that I want to get rid of. Now I don't want to be very heavy-handed, so I'm going to use my brush again, and I'm going to go make sure this is on white because I want to take away from our image, and now in this case I want to take away that green tint. So I'm just going to gently just rub that and bring this in very slowly. If I take it over too far, I'm going to take all the colour out of my squirrel, and I don't really want that, so I'm going to put that back, and I'm just going to use the white to gently come in just around the edge, just very slowly, just a little bit at a time, just to take away that little bit of green. And you go around your image just gently, just taking out everything. You can make your brush smaller or bigger. There is a shortcut to do that, which I'm using, which is your bracket keys. So if you do an open bracket, it makes it smaller. If you do a closed bracket, it makes your brush bigger. I'm just going to go around very gently and just take out the colour around my squirrel where it needs it. It doesn't need it all over. See, that's fine. Let's go back a little bit. Just a little bit, just to take it off. Just take the green away. It does take the colour out, but luckily his whiskers are white anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And to be fair, we probably picked quite a difficult subject to do. There's a lot easier subjects if you want to do a car or a post box or anything like that. That kind of works really well. I'm just going to go back to fit screen. Right. So now we're getting to where we want to be. That's pretty close. And just to show you, it's not just our squirrel that we can change. Although I didn't select anything else, I can still remove the layer by using our brush. So if I go back to black, which is to remove the black and white image, if I wanted to, I could just run it over and recolor our little nuts on the side just by painting over them, and we get the color back in our nuts. Yeah, if I make a mistake, it's not a problem. Another shortcut, hit the X key, just the X, nothing else, and that changes it from black to white. Yeah. So I can go back and just make some fine adjustments using that brush. So there's our squirrel with coloured nuts, and that's how you do a colour pop or anything else. So that's today's tutorial. I hope it helps. If you've got any questions, just drop me a line, but it's fairly simple. Just remember, whatever you isolate, so you isolate things using your adjustment brush or your quick selection brush, it's very, very simple but effective, and it can look really, really good. Again, go back to our layers just to continue this. These little icons, if you like, that's basically you can turn them off or turn them on. So I can turn that off. That means I only see what's behind that layer. Yeah, I can change it all the time. So it's always there. My original image is always there too. And that's our finished image. Okay, hope you've enjoyed that little tutorial. It's a little simple trick, but highly effective, and it can work extremely well. So good luck, and I'll do another one. If anybody has any other thoughts on what they would like to see, give me a shout, and take care. Have a good day. See you later.